This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. Hello everybody. We got a very interesting Critical Thought for you today. This was suggested in one of the comments on a previous Critical Thought. And as always, if you have a topic you'd like me to cover here relating to game design or the industry, be sure to let me know. So, the topic for today is a discussion on multi-year game development cycles. Is this still viable for the game industry, especially when it comes to the indie market? Now, for those of you who follow the game industry, you know, of course, that video games definitely take time to be developed. And one of the recent trends that we've been seeing, especially from the indie space, is a focus on quicker development cycles, sometimes 3 to 6 months, maybe at most a year. And one of the interesting parts about this is that it's led to almost this like rapid fire of games being released, sometimes by the same developer or same publisher. Now, of course, these games aren't going to be like Call of Duty or Final Fantasy 15 levels of graphical quality, but they are released in short order. They are usually built around a very streamlined or simple gameplay loop and are on the cheaper side of things, maybe between $5 to $15, somewhere like that. And what this shorter development cycle is built around is a pretty much old adage of business or production. The quicker you can make something, the cheaper it's going to cost you in the long run. And this is kind of where this discussion came from. Is it still viable to spend years working on a video game? And it's a very difficult discussion to have. And it also gets back to the topic of the product versus the art. If you're just focusing 100% on the art side of games, then you don't care if a game takes you 3 years, 5 years, 10 years to be made. A really good example that would be something like Dwarf Fortress, which, as you know, the developers had no real intention of selling this as a commercial product. They just wanted to make the game. And I believe the developer said that they were going to keep working on it until who knows. But that is the very definition of focusing on the art. Now, with product, you want to get that game done as quickly as possible. And with these short development cycles, if the game is still having trouble, we will usually see developers, grind themselves or overload to try to get the game done as fast as possible. Now, of course, this can lead to bugs, issues, and stuff like that, but if the game does well enough, it can, of course, be patched and updated post-release. Now, with this idea of development cycles, one of the things about video games, as we've talked about before, is that there is no such thing as the perfect game development. I don't think there's ever been a case where developers said, I will make my game in exactly 1 year, 3 days, and 5 hours from now, and it will be done, and that actually happened. There is a lot of things you can do to mitigate the risk, be it through good management skills, project, organizing your team, understanding the market, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, video games are not a sure thing. And as we've said before, your design going in can be vastly different from when it comes out. And with that said, the risks involved when you're making a game compound the more time it takes to make it. As I said a few minutes ago, some developers go for maybe 3 to 6 months or a year. I know when I spoke with Harebrained Schemes, who made Shadowrun, they're working on Battletech, they talked about trying to adhere to an 18-month cycle, so a year and a half. And I know right now for some of you watching this, you're probably thinking to yourself, a year and a half? That's a lot of time. It really isn't. When it comes to this industry, time has no meaning. It feels like it's only been like 4 or 5 months for me, and we are pretty much about to end 2016 as I'm recording this. And time moves very fast, especially when you're working on a project like this. And when it comes to making a video game, if you don't have a publisher backing you, then you're not going to see any real income until the game is done. And if that game takes 3 to 4 years, it can be very hard to live off of no money coming in unless you're working a part-time job or the game is being worked on the side. And this is where the challenge of this kind of multi-year development comes into play. As I just said, the more time you spend on a game, the more it's going to cost you in the long run. And video games are already risky enough as is. If you're putting all your eggs in one basket for some 4, 5, 6 year Uber game that you're hoping will make you more money than Minecraft, it's just a very hard thing to, hedge your bet on. In that same span, you could release who knows how many games. If we adhere to a year and a half, that could be 3 games, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. Now, of course, going back to the art versus the product, you could say that one game could be this grand ultimate idea that no one's ever done before and could make you, profitable. It could be the next Minecraft or Undertale. But from a product point of view, again, you are putting a lot on one idea. And as we've said before, there are a lot of things that can go wrong with a game. Sometimes from the developer side, sometimes it's just completely out of their control. And when we're talking about these games that are in the years of development, this becomes all the more so. On frequent podcasts in the past, I've spoken to Chris Park from Arkin Games. They are, of course, famously known as the developer behind AI Wars. And he talked about how they had to shift their development model from these, 2 to 3 year mega games to shorter cycles to see if this idea will even be popular in the market. Because they got burned really bad on A Valley Without Wind. For those of you who are watching this, A Valley Without Wind was a very experimental game. Almost a Metroidvania roguelike. Just a very different game from anything else out there in the market. And they put a lot on it. They spent several years working on it, and it just sunk like a dead weight in the water kind of deal. And since then, they have shifted to shorter development cycles, or they've been trying to, with games like Skyward Collapse. I always forget the names of their games off the top of my head. I'm really sorry. Shattered Haven, and a few other ones. But getting back to the topic at hand, for each year that you are working on a game, again, this will compound the risk exponentially. And I'm about to say something that I think may get me in trouble. But here it goes. This year, Stardew Valley has certainly become a very popular game. It's my I think I said it was number 4 of my top 10 of the year. And this is the very definition of what we see from the indie market. A passion project from a guy who wanted to make the game, finally being released to massive success. It took him 4 years to develop the game on his own, and of course doing a whole lot of grinding in the process. But with that said, here's kind of the ugly truth of that. If you were to tell me that a team of people, 4 or 5 plus guys or girls working on a game like Stardew Valley and taking 4 years to make it, I would have to give that management or that design of that game an F. Because it should not take 4 years to make a game like Stardew Valley. Now again, with the caveat of having a team behind it. If you're working on a game by yourself, the rules are different. But getting back to what we were just saying, the more time spent on a game, not only is it going to cost more to make, but again, the risk involved of getting that money back and, fingers crossed, making a profit go up. And when we're talking about games that are like 5, 10 years in development, again, something had to have gone wrong during that development cycle. A game that, the development was perfect does not take 10 years to be made. And as you know, recently with the game Owlboy that was released, again, I don't have first-hand knowledge, but from what I played of the game so far, I'm not sure if I see 10 years worth of development in this game. And that is not a nice thing to say, I know. And it's one of the things that has really become muddled when it comes to the game industry, especially with indie development. You have some games being released for $20 and people are going, why the hell is your game worth $20? I can get something that looks like Killing Floor 2 for $30. And then you have people who play Killing Floor 2 going, why the hell are you charging $30 for Killing Floor 2? There are all these amazing games for $15 or $20. And again, because there is no set guidelines or step-by-step guide to making a video game, you can't really compare two or more different development cycles to each other. Even if they're from the same genre, teams are different, the tech they're using is different, even what they're trying to build, even if it's within that same genre, can be different. And one other thing about that, when we're talking about this, we're not referring to games as a service or long-term game development. Games that are being in development for 3-4 years plus. The difference is that the game is actually released. Again, Payday 2 was released 2 years ago, and they've been working on and continue content and patches since then. What we're referring to is a game that is not making anyone any money, that is being worked on for 3, 4, 5 years at a time. And when we're getting into that level of game development, the risk involved is like playing roulette with your eyes closed or bungee jumping without a cord. And the only other times we've seen games take that long or more to be released, not only is there usually trouble, but sometimes it doesn't pan out. Duke Nukem Forever was, I think, at least 10 years, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. But for those of you watching, the question of the day is, what do you think about multi-year game development? Is it still worth it? Again, there is a greater topic which we need to go back to regarding the product versus the art, or again, the business versus the art in this case. Because as I said earlier, there is a case for spending a long time on a game. Quality, as we all know, takes time. You're not going to see a unique, one-of-a-kind, polished title be finished in 2-3 months. If someone comes up to you and says, I can make Final Fantasy 15 for $200,000 in 6 months, just like a glove slap them in the face kind of deal. But when it comes to multi-year game development, it is a very risky prospect. And as we've been seeing over the last few years, especially with the rise of the indie market, it's becoming harder and harder to justify having all that risk with a game. As we've said on previous Critical Thoughts and previous topics on Game Wisdom, for every big name, game of the year, amazing game that comes out that just wows everyone, there are probably countless dozens of games that come out and then they just disappear. And as we said when we were talking about the sales or holiday sales, the window for a game to be its most profitable is usually about a month, maybe a little bit more than that. So if your game doesn't light up the sales charts within that first month, chances are it's not going to do that. Now, of course, things can maybe rise up. Maybe you get lucky of a sale or a YouTuber takes notice. But for the most part, once you've gone past that month, the chance of you breaking even or making a profit start to go straight down. But we're going to wrap things up here. Again, to summarize, multi-year game development has certainly become a very risky prospect, especially when we throw in stuff like Kickstarter. When you have all your fans basically backing your game, there is no, secondary option. If you just blew through $400,000, $500,000, you can't go back to your Kickstarter fans and say, hey guys, can you throw us another $300,000 and see if we can finish this game? Now with publishers, sometimes they're willing to help you out if they see enough progress being made. But again, when we start talking about games 3 years plus in development, it's becoming harder and harder to justify that. And on the flip side, that's also going to, or that is impacting, seeing bigger or more unique titles. Because again, quality will always take time. Games that are unique or have never before seen gameplay, you can't just hash that out in a few months. last year when we talked about Renowned Explorers, it took Abby Games about a year to make that game, and they told me in an interview that it was hell to make a unique game and create the engine or work on the engine at the same time. But again, if we start talking about game development and engines and stuff like that, who knows how long we'll be. So, once again, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. As always, if you're enjoying the content, be sure to like and subscribe. If you have, as I said at the start, any future topics or suggestions for Critical Thoughts, let me know in the comments below. Be sure to vote for the 1000 sub Let's Play. At some point, I will hopefully get to it. And otherwise, once again, I am Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Have a great rest of the night, and I will talk to you again tomorrow with more great content here and on Game Wisdom. Take care. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.